Delighted to have Tom Savage of Three Red Kings back on the Star Sport podcast this week to chat all things rugby, and we have a lot to get you. And I'm going to start off Tom, with Jack Crowley. He's the man who came through the ranks of Bandon Rugby Club and Bandon Grammar. And look at him now, one of the hottest prospects in Irish rugby, and just off the back of his Ireland senior debut against Fiji. Are we allowed to get excited, Tom?
Very much so. I think looking at Jack Crowley, he has been a guy who's been kind of on the come up for a while. You look at his skill set, you look at what he's achieved in the game to date. Like, he has been the star player for an Irish under-20 side. He has been a guy who has dominated like that level. He got into the Munster Academy in year one. He like coming up on after his first year out of school. He gets promoted to a senior deal after his first year in the academy. He is a guy who has just the sky's the limit. You know, you look at, he's played European rugby. He's done well there. This is a guy who has just, for me, he has everything. And international rugby was an inevitability. And I think that he has lived up to that level now. And for me, he's a guy who has, like, especially when you look at his potential, limitless.
I want to phrase this right, because in the last couple of years in West Cork, we've been so lucky. The likes of Gavin Coombs has come through to win a couple of caps. Fineen Wycherley won a senior cap as well. And obviously Darren Sweetnam going back a good few years as well. But in terms of potential, is Jack the one we can really get excited about? Because I'm thinking there's no heir apparent to Johnny Sexton just yet. There's been a couple of people auditioning for that role. And obviously Joey Carberry is probably at the top of that queue for the last couple of years. But it seems like if things go the way they are going in this trajectory for Jack Crowley, that he could be the big star coming out of West Cork rugby.
100%. Like, I think when you look at Johnny Sexton, is a guy who has such a huge aura as a player that it's kind of hard to imagine anybody actually ever replacing him. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the qualities that Jack Crowley has, not just on field, but the characteristics that he has in his game, he to me seems to be the guy most suited to it. Because again, you look at Joey Carberry, a good player. Like, nobody could say Joey Carberry isn't a good player. But when you look at the personality on field, not as dominant as I feel maybe that a 10 should be for me. You look at Kieran Frawley, a guy who has had a lot of people in the Irish media and even some of the Irish coaches talking him up as being a guy who could be the next, the heir to Johnny Sexton. Personally, I don't buy that. I look at the way that Ireland have been almost trying to get game time at 10 for Kieran Frawley so he can go back to Leinster and play 10, where he's been used almost everywhere else. I think he has 4 starts at 10 this year. Like, Jack Crowley, all of his starts bar one have been at 10. And he's played European rugby at starting 10, which Kieran Frawley hasn't done, which Harry Byrne before him hasn't done. I think when you look at Jack Crowley, he has the qualities you'd look for. Look, anything can happen in a player's development that can turn them from being a guy who's going to be the guy in Irish rugby to being just another fellow who has a decent career but doesn't ever reach the heights. But I think if you look at Jack Crowley, you'd have all the qualities that you'd expect from him. He has those. Like, for a guy who you'd want to be your main man, Jack Crowley, for me, has them. And it's all now about just getting it on field, backing it up repeatedly, and playing over and over again, and building those pictures for himself as being the primary playmaker. And I think the system Munster are playing at the moment, it suits Jack Crowley down to the ground. And that for me is the encouraging thing. Whereas if he can nail down that at Munster, and I think that it's an open road for him to do so, that he can start really building and become a guy of the scale that he needs, where it's, because I think at the moment, I think if you're to think about Ireland right now, Johnny Sexton is the main man. He is the guy there without question. Joey Carberry is the backup to Johnny Sexton. Like, I think that's something that everybody could agree on, right? Like, Carberry might not think that way, but that's the way it's certainly been selected. Jack Crowley, for me, has the personality and he has the game where you're looking at, even later on this year, maybe later on this season, where we're looking at Jack Crowley versus Johnny Sexton as being an active battle for that shirt. I think that's more of a possibility at the moment than what it is with Joey Carberry. And if Ireland can even get to that level, they'll be in a much better place. But Crowley has some work to do to get to that level. He has to nail down that number 10 jersey from Munster. I think he has the potential for it. And from there, once he has that, then it's just a straight shootout. And I think that he's well placed to be that guy, like coming up and being like the most influential, the most, I suppose, well-known player out of West Cork rugby could easily be Jack Crowley. It's soon enough, but certainly by next year, I think he's a guy who's well in with a shout of going to the World Cup, and who knows what can happen there.
How does he go about nailing out that number 10 jersey for Munster?
Well, I think you look at Munster's system that Munster looked to bring in this season. It's a big change from last year. Munster last year didn't really have a set style of play week to week. It was one of the main issues I had with the team as the season developed, where there was no Munster style. It would adapt week to week depending on the opposition. So one week Munster would be a kind of a very kick dominant team. Against somebody else, Munster would be a ball dominant team looking to play possession. There was no consistency. What Mike Prendergast has done, what Dennis Leamy have done, Graham Rowntree, like they have changed how Munster train, they have changed how Munster play, and it's quite distinct. We're going to talk about the Munster South Africa game later on, but you can see elements of it in that game. What Jack Crowley needs to do with Munster is fit that system. You need a player, a primary playmaker, number 10, fly half, whatever you want to call it. The Munster system needs to have a guy who can challenge the gain line, who can beat players one-on-one, but who can also then find passes, who can kick accurately. And then you've got goal kicking, which is a completely separate thing altogether. But from a phase play perspective, I think Jack Crowley is the best placed out of all the three players at Munster to be that guy. Because what Munster are trying to do is similar enough to what Racing were trying to do last season. And like Finn Russell was the guy for Mike Prendergast there. Jack Crowley can be the same guy here. And I think if you look at his athleticism, his ability to beat players, his ability to kind of open up his own attack. One of my main criticisms this year with Munster, when Munster have played poorly this season, has been when the number 10 has been more reliant on passing, more reliant on kicking the ball. It's got to be all three: pass, kick, run. That will be this system in complete balance. And Jack Crowley, even at the weekend, showed that he can commit defenders himself and then pass into the space that he has created. He can create his own attack, and he isn't reliant on running or hitting a big runner on his inside shoulder to create a compression. He can do that himself. And that's going to be the thing that will mark him out as being different from Ben Healy and from Joey Carberry, in my opinion.
Looking at the Ireland-Australia game this weekend, so is the ideal situation start with Sexton, but bring Crowley off the bench with 20 minutes to go?
Ireland don't do that. When you look at Johnny Sexton, even there against South Africa a couple of weeks ago, he was still on the field with 75 minutes gone because it was a narrow game and Ireland wanted to win it. So what Andy Farrell has done over the last 3 years, we'll say, has been keep Johnny Sexton on the field at all times if he's fit, if the game is in the balance. What I would like is if they started with Jack Crowley, start him at 10 with Johnny Sexton on the bench. Johnny Sexton is 37 years of age. He is the most well-known, well-scouted, well-analysed player in world rugby, I would suggest. We know everything that there is to know about him. So why not start with Jack Crowley? Mm-hmm. Why not? It's an autumn international. It's at home against Australia. Why not? Let's get a look at this guy with the rest of the Irish machine around him. Let's not do what we typically do in Ireland, which is like at the weekend where Joey Carberry was thrown in ice cold. First time he started a game in how many years, or like how many months rather. Last time he started was, I think, against Italy, which Ireland ended up playing against 13 men in that game. The last game before that was against France because Johnny Sexton was injured. We're playing him alongside new combination in midfield, bunch of new guys in the pack. And then Andy Farrell after the game is wondering what's going on here. Like, why does this not look the same? It can't be the same because Ireland have a set team. And when you go away from that set team, things will be different. Why not do it a different way? Why not have it where everything is the same about the Irish team? Furlong, Porter, Sheehan, Ryan, Byrne, Henderson, O'Mahony, Doris, Van der Fleer, Jameson Gibson Park, and Jack Crowley. Why not do that? Why not give him that opportunity to run so you can see what he's like in that situation? And if things aren't going well, or if he gets to, we'll say, get into 55 minutes, 60 minutes, then you bring on Sexton, because we know everything about Johnny Sexton. Why not have him in that role for once? I'd be surprised if they did that, but I think it depends on Sexton's fitness, because he's not fully fit at the moment either. But I think that, look, Jack Crowley is well able for it. Well able for him. Throw him into that situation, let him play, and let him develop. He's got the talent, he's got the mindset. Give him the experience to work with. That's what I would do, but I'm not Andy Farrell.
So while Jack Crowley is now in the conversation, we're saying for a place in that plane to the World Cup next year, Gavin Coombs seems to fall down the pecking order slightly. He was part of that Ireland A team that, so they didn't impress against New Zealand, and then Gavin was released back into Munster, and obviously he played against South Africa last week. So for Gavin, what does Gavin need to do to put himself back in the shop window, back in the frame for Ireland? Because if we're thinking of the World Cup next year, there's not too many games between now and the World Cup, and the Six Nations is competitive, and Andy Farrell is not going to be the experiment there. So what does Gavin need to do, Tom?
I think with Gavin, like, he didn't play well in that Ireland A game for me. A lot of other guys didn't play well either. My theory on this is that what Andy Farrell wants from his back row is not suited to what Gavin Coombs is good at. You look at the way Ireland played against that, or Ireland A played against that New Zealand team. The guys who were there were basically playing the Peter O'Mahony role, the Josh Van der Fleer role, and the Caelan Doris role. Caelan Doris and Gavin Coombs might both play at number 8, but they're very, very different players. I think that if Gavin Coombs played in the second row, I think that he would be closer to being a regular for Ireland now than what he currently is in the back row. Ireland use their back rows quite differently. Gavin Coombs would be a primary ball carrier for me. You look at him against South Africa A, for example. He was running through 2-man tackles against big men, and he was winning those collisions. Ireland don't use their number 8 like that. You will see Gavin Coombs hitting the ball, or Caelan Doris hitting the ball up at times, but not to the same level that Munster would use Gavin Coombs in that role. The Irish back row is kind of complementary to most of the ball carrying, which is either done in midfield or done in the second row. So for Caelan Doris, he would be a very different type of player. So for Gavin Coombs, he can't become Caelan Doris, because even the way Ireland use Caelan Doris to defend is in sort of like on that weird space where it's not exactly on the edge of the forward line in defense, but it's close enough to it. So if you've ever watched Gavin Coombs playing for Ireland, you're wondering, geez, he's in a position there where he's missing tackles. How did that happen? That doesn't happen at Munster, because he defends in a different place from Munster. He defends closer to the ruck, but Ireland use him further out, because that's where Caelan Doris plays, and that's what that role is. Like, people get wrapped up in this idea of 6, 7, and 8, like a blind side, open side, number 8. Like, they all mean very different things to different teams. Now, each team will have a role or a job that they give their number 6 or their number 7 or whatever else, but it's not a cliche where, okay, you're a number 6, so you will be just tackling guys now, and you'll be carrying the ball short, or you'll just be in the line out. That's not really how it works anymore. You look at Peter O'Mahony, for example, wears number 6 in his back, but like doesn't play like a traditional blind side. If you try to imagine what that look, I think most people think they imagine somebody like Dan Lydiot when they think about a typical number 6. That's not Peter O'Mahony's game, and that's not how a lot of teams run that now. So for Gavin Coombs, I think he has to just keep doing what he's good at. If that means he's doing it for Munster, make it controversial when you're not selected. Make it controversial when you're not brought up to that next level. I think that ultimately what will get Gavin Coombs back into this Irish conversation is a change in system at Irish level, where somebody with his primary ball carrying skills and his incredible passing skills as well, like he's not a one-dimensional player. But I think if you end up trying to use a hammer like you would a hacksaw, you're not going to get the same results with either. For Gavin Coombs, he's a guy who I think his role set perfectly suits what Munster want him to do. He's a core part of that Munster back 5. For Ireland, he isn't, and at the moment they're looking for guys who can be good role fits with what they know works. And it's no surprise to me to see Max Deegan all of a sudden now being talked up as being the next guy, because he's a very similar player to Caelan Doris. They're good at the same things. They have the same physical profile. Whereas Gavin Coombs, like I said, I think would be further along if he was a second row right now, because most of the stuff that Gavin Coombs does really well for Munster, Ireland tend to use their second rows for. So that's a bit of bad luck, I think, at the moment. But I think that things always change in this game. I think that if it's a case that there are a few injuries elsewhere, not necessarily just to Caelan Doris, but I think if there's a few injuries elsewhere in that Irish pack, they may need to rebalance. And when you're rebalancing, you're talking about, well, how do we get ball carrying into this pack? How do we get a primary ball carrier into this pack? And Gavin Coombs fits that description. I think at the moment what Ireland do, it doesn't fit with where Gavin Coombs is good at right now. But that doesn't mean he can't be involved at Irish level or have a good Irish career. I just think he just needs to keep hitting the ground running for Munster, dominate at that level, and make any omission of his controversial. That's all he can do.
Gavin was one of the West Cork men involved at Munster in Páirc Uí Chaoimh last Thursday night, beat South Africa 28-14. Magical night on Lee's side, under lights, 41,000. You were there. Tell me about it. Was it as good as it looked on TV, or was it better?
Unreal. What a game it was. Like I was saying to you there before we recorded, I arrived down around 4 in Cork from Limerick, and the buzz around the city was palpable, you know. And on the walk out to Páirc Uí Chaoimh later on in the evening, the pubs were rammed, like the Idle Hour, Goldbergs. They were full of people, not just inside, but outside, 3 or 4 deep. Like, it's rare enough you'd see that outside big championship games with Cork. Mm-hmm. So walking out to the stadium, you could just see thousands of people doing the same. And the actual stadium itself, when I got out there, it was coming out at around 6:30. The scale of the place of Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it's a colossal stadium, but so many people, thousands of people milling around, eating, talking, doing video calls, the whole lot. It was so busy. And when I got into the stadium, the terrace ends were both full at 7:00, half an hour before kickoff. I've been to a lot of Munster games. I've been to a lot of Ireland games. I have never seen that. The atmosphere was building very, very quickly. And like just the air of expectation and excitement that was there. And it was all capped off perfectly when Munster walked out to Zombie at the start of the game. The energy that was there in the stadium was unreal. I'll never forget it. It was a very, very special occasion. And I think prior to that game, during the week, I was thinking, now, with a bit of COVID around the place as well, I think everybody knows somebody who's stuck in because they're after picking up COVID. And, the cost of living and, all these other things that keep people away from events that they've bought tickets for or whatever else. I only had people looking for tickets during the week. Now, typically I have somebody kind of going, look, I can't make it. Can I move on this ticket or whatever else? I only had people looking to get tickets. So people were up for this, and it was a sellout, legit. Like I was there, I looked up behind me in the press area, and every seat was full behind me, up in the top stand, in the south stand in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. All the seats were full. And when Shane Daly scored that try inside the first 3 minutes, it was incredible. What a moment. Like, Munster needed a moment early in that game anyway. But when they got it, the crowd were just unglued. And it was an amazing occasion. Just one of those things live. I won't forget that game. Just it was so special anyway because it's in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But the way that it played out, just perfect. Just what a night. And I walked out early. I don't really hang around for the post-match press conferences. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to head away, get into the car. I was surrounded by thousands of people walking out. You hear all the things about people talking about how, oh, what a game. When's the next game on? When are Munster playing in Thomond Park next? And all this other stuff, which kind of sounds like stuff you'd hear in, kind of a bad radio ad.
Yeah.
But it was exactly what people were doing. And just the success of the event, I think it'll echo for a while. Like, there's always going to be issues where people can't go to games. There's been some questions from people in the media about the connection between Munster and Munster fans. I think a lot of these people are disconnected from reality, I think, to be honest, because life often gets in the way when it comes to going to a sporting event. There's certain reasons why you can't have a sellout every week or 20,000 people in the stadium every other week. Life gets in the way. Things are very expensive at the moment. But this is a game where people knew about it in advance. There was excitement there. Remember, and it's not like Munster were codding people into thinking that Sia Khaleesi is going to be at this game. Eben Etzebeth. I was looking at some of the literature for Bristol are playing the same South Africa A side this week. They've got Sia Khaleesi and Eben Etzebeth in the brochure. Munster were talking the whole time about this is the South Africa Select 15. The entire time there was no dressing it up, but 41,400 people showed up anyway on a wet Thursday night in Cork, and it was a nasty night. Traffic was a nightmare. The energy that was there, I don't think anybody who was in that stadium or maybe even watched the game live on TV will ever forget it.
Is this a spark that Munster needed this season? Like, what can Munster take the positives they can take out of this game and use going forward?
Huge positives. I suppose it'll only really be truly, the value of it will only really be seen, I suppose, in hindsight. So we look back maybe in January and think that was a big turning point for Munster. What they can take from it is that even in really tough weather conditions where you might be thinking this is up the jumper stuff here, we saw that Munster can play ball. Munster can put some good phases of rugby together, and they can, like, whatever about South Africa whatever about their attacking capabilities, they were very direct. I mean, they did try to play a bit of ball in the first half, but they went away from that fairly quickly. Whatever about anything else, they were a good defensive side. They play a kind of a South African style blitz defense, which is very difficult to play around and has traditionally been very difficult for Munster to play around over the last couple of seasons. They have a huge scrum, they have a huge line out, they have a huge maul. Now Munster struggled in the scrum, but I'll note as well, Josh Wycherley struggled initially with Thomas Dutoy, a huge man. Like, he was giving up. I was looking at it. He was giving up around 25 kg to this guy, right? But he's stuck in there. No quitting this guy. No quitting Josh Wycherley. Bit like Rabah Slimani when he was playing Claremont below down in Claremont there a few years ago. He struggled initially, but got a hold of it as the game went on. And what Munster showed is that what they do works against a big physical side. Because whatever about anything else, this South Africa A side are a decent side defensively, and they hit hard. They have a lot of big physical men who will punish you. And they had an experience, like you look at Henko van Wyk, for example, their outside centre. A lot of people talking about him being one of the best young midfielders in the URC. Before this game, you had Cornal Hendricks, hugely experienced guy for the Bulls. He was playing in midfield, but he often has played in midfield. Like, you look at the way that Munster were able to attack here. That's what gave me the most amount of encouragement. Antoine Frisch, game changer, looked absolutely fabulous. Ben Healy looked really good, best I've seen from him this season, or I think all year actually. You look at Edwin Adogbo, an absolute superstar. This guy is going to be. He is such a freak talent at 19 years of age. Gavin Coombs impressing, running into two big South Africans every carry, getting to the gain line and over it. John Hodnett, one of the best I call him small forwards, because again, just like, what's an open side? There's all different definitions about what it is. But when you look at John Hodnett, good ball carrying, great defense. His breakdown work was so aggressive. In the build-up to Shane Daly's try, there was a moment where Gavin Coombs trucked it up to try and compress the defense. He was isolated. John Hodnett comes in and cleans out Ruan Norkia and Jason Jenkins. Two guys he's giving up 5 or 6 inches to in height, probably giving up around 20 kg to in weight, bombing him off the ball. They had nothing for him. And he was he was being dug into guys all night. That's what John Hodnett does. Great performance from him. Outstanding, I would say. So many individuals played so well. Diarmuid Barron was aggressive, was nasty. Look, you look at Diarmuid Barron. He's not a guy who is he's not going to be Dan Sheehan. Dan Sheehan is 6'3", bit like a back row. Diarmuid Barron, that's not his game. He's not that type of guy. But what he can be is just a nasty, aggressive hooker who is a pain to play against. And that's what Diarmuid Barron is turning into. I think they just, so many guys played so well. And in the conditions as well. they can be so proud of themselves. There's so much for them to take out of this game into the next one against Connacht. The biggest thing is confidence. We know this works now. That's what they'll be saying to each other. We know that this works. Keep at that. Keep the standards where they were in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, and we'll deal with most teams in the URC and trouble the likes. And remember, there's top players to come back into this side too. This was not a first choice or a kind of a top layer Munster side. There's so many guys out injured who'll be coming back. So many guys away on international duty who'll be coming back, like likes of Jack Crowley, Craig Casey, Peter Romani, Tyg Byrne. This Munster side is not finished this season. They've had a tough start. It's been difficult, but I have a feeling this could be something of a turning point, but they've got to back it up now against Connacht in a few weeks.
Oh, superb. It's great to finish this conversation on a positive. But before I let you go, Tom, here in the Southern Star, I'm known for claiming anyone with a West Cork link as a West Cork person. Like Tyg Furlong is Whitty Island, like it's the Whitty Island blood that have made Tyg Furlong the force that he is. Padraig Harrington's father is down from Beara, and obviously it's that those Beara roots are made Padraig Harrington so successful. Jack O'Donoghue's father, Dad Neelis, went to school in Innishannon. He was there for years and years. Can we claim Jack as a bit of West Cork? Are we allowed to do that?
I think now we have to. I think that it's only right and appropriate that we induct him into the West Cork Mafia. Innishannon? Really?
His father's Neelis went to school in Kilcolman in Innishannon. So I was contacted during the week about that. So it's another great West Cork link. It's something I'm looking into a small bit more, but yeah, it's there. So it must be that West Cork blood, that West Cork breeding again.
It has to be. I think it's the only reason that any of these guys have been successful. I think we just have to just keep making more of them. That's the challenge now.
Yeah. West Cork is the nursery for rugby talent. But look, come here, Tom. You've been super at your time again, and thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.